The mystery began with a single gift. It looked like an ordinary antique clock. Old, worn, and no longer working. But Detective William Murdoch had learned that sometimes the smallest objects hide the darkest secrets. The clock had belonged to Johnny Moon, a famous private investigator from New York who had recently died in what everyone believed was a tragic car accident. His widow, Vivian Moon, brought the clock to Toronto and asked Inspector Albert Choi to keep it as a memory of their old friendship. It seemed like a touching moment, but before the day was over, everything changed. A man was found murdered inside a public washroom near Union Station. He had been stabbed several times, yet no one knew his real identity. When Murdoch searched the victim's pockets, he found something strange. 5 different identity cards. 5 different names. Every document was fake. Whoever this man was, he had spent years hiding his true identity. Murdoch slowly looked around the crime scene. There were blood marks near one wall. The pattern suggested that a large suitcase had once been standing beside the victim. But the suitcase was gone. Someone had taken it, and judging by the amount of blood, they had risked everything to get it. A frightened restroom attendant finally came forward. He admitted that another man had entered just before the murder. The stranger had paid him money to leave his post for a few minutes. When Murdoch asked for a description, the answer caught everyone's attention. The man had only one leg. Now the investigation had 2 mysteries. Who was the dead man, and what was hidden inside the missing suitcase? Meanwhile, Inspector Choi welcomed Vivian Moon to Toronto. She had traveled from New York hoping to escape the painful memories of her husband's death. Although she smiled politely, Murdoch noticed sadness in her eyes. She was trying to start over. But it seemed that someone had followed her across the border. During lunch, Vivian introduced Choi to 2 wealthy friends from New York, Cecil and Myrtle Winchester. They appeared friendly and charming. Yet Murdoch couldn't ignore the strange tension between them. Every smile felt forced. Every conversation seemed carefully planned. Something about them didn't feel right. Back at the station, Detective Watts uncovered another clue. A railway porter recognized the murdered man. He remembered seeing him arrive at Union Station while being followed by a one-legged stranger carrying a cane. The chase had begun long before the murder. Murdoch contacted police departments across Canada and the United States. Hours later, an answer arrived from Philadelphia. The dead man had once been known as Ansel Tuttle, a career criminal who had disappeared years earlier. Now the case was becoming even more dangerous. Professional criminals rarely travel hundreds of miles without a reason. Whatever had been inside that missing suitcase had to be valuable. Very valuable. That evening another shocking discovery was made. A second body was found behind Vivian Moon's hotel. This victim had not been stabbed. He had been strangled with an unusual piece of fabric. The killer had left almost no evidence behind. Murdoch examined the tiny fibers trapped around the victim's neck. They were unlike anything he had seen before. Smooth, artificial, modern. Someone had used a rare material that few people even knew existed. The second victim was quickly identified as Jasper Stokes. Like the first victim, he was from Philadelphia. And just like Ansel Tuttle, he had a long criminal history. 2 dangerous men from the same city had traveled all the way to Toronto. Both were now dead. This could no longer be a coincidence. Murdoch spread mats across his desk. He marked every location connected to the victims. Philadelphia, New York, Toronto. Every road seemed to point toward Vivian Moon, not because she was guilty, but because everyone else seemed to be following her. Late that night, Inspector Choi visited Vivian to make sure she was safe. She thanked him for his concern. As they talked about old memories, feelings they had hidden for years slowly returned. Long before Vivian had married Johnny Moon, she and Choi had cared deeply for each other. Life had taken them in different directions. Now fate had unexpectedly brought them together again. For a brief moment, it seemed happiness might finally find them. But outside the hotel, someone stood silently in the darkness, watching every window, watching every movement, waiting. Murdoch didn't believe in coincidence. 2 murders, a stolen suitcase, a dead detective, a grieving widow, old friends with hidden secrets, and criminals crossing borders. Somewhere inside this puzzle was a truth that someone was willing to kill to protect. The only question was who would be the next victim. Murdoch refused to believe the murders were random. Every clue pointed toward the stolen suitcase. Yet when detectives searched Vivian Moon's luggage, they found nothing except clothes and personal belongings. If the criminals had crossed 2 countries to find something, it wasn't there anymore. So where had it gone? The next morning, Murdoch questioned Vivian again. This time she admitted something she had kept secret. Since Johnny Moon's death, strange men had appeared outside her apartment in New York. Some demanded money. Others searched her home while she was away. Oddly, they never stole jewelry or valuables. They searched every room and left empty-handed. Someone wasn't looking for expensive items. They were searching for one very specific thing. Murdoch immediately realized the break-ins, the murders, and the stolen suitcase were connected. Johnny Moon had been working on a dangerous investigation before his death. Perhaps he had found something worth killing for. Meanwhile, Detective Watts continued investigating the two dead criminals. Both had once belonged to the same gang in Philadelphia. Years earlier, $20,000 had disappeared during a criminal operation. The money had never been recovered. Rumors claimed someone had betrayed the gang and escaped with the cash. Murdoch leaned back in his chair. What if Johnny Moon found the missing money? He wondered. The theory explained everything. If Johnny had secretly recovered the stolen money before his death, every criminal connected to the case would now be searching for it. But one question remained. Why hadn't Vivian simply handed the money over? Unless she didn't know where it was. Later that afternoon, Murdoch visited Cecil Winchester. The wealthy businessman calmly admitted that he had hired Johnny Moon shortly before his death to recover $20,000 stolen from one of his businesses. According to Cecil, Johnny had failed, but Murdoch wasn't convinced. Johnny Moon had a reputation for solving impossible cases. Failure didn't sound like him. As Murdoch left the Winchester home, he noticed Myrtle Winchester standing alone near the garden. She looked nervous. Before Murdoch could speak to her, she quietly whispered, "Be careful who you trust." Then she walked away before explaining what she meant. That warning stayed in Murdoch's mind all day. Back at the station, another discovery changed everything. The unusual fibers found around Jasper Stokes' neck matched an expensive blue scarf. Only a few people owned scarves made from that rare material. One of them was Cecil Winchester. Suddenly, the friendly businessman became the prime suspect. But Murdoch knew evidence could be misleading. Someone wanted the detectives to focus on Cecil. Perhaps the real killer was hiding behind him. That evening, Inspector Choi arranged dinner with Vivian. He finally admitted that he had loved her years ago and regretted letting her leave New York. Vivian smiled sadly. She confessed that part of her had always wondered what life might have been like if they had stayed together. For a moment it seemed their painful past had finally found peace. Then Vivian suddenly became frightened. She looked through the restaurant window and saw a familiar face standing across the street. Without saying a word, she asked Choi to leave immediately. When they reached the hotel, she refused to explain. She simply locked herself inside her room. Murdoch arrived only minutes later. He found Choi standing outside Vivian's door holding a letter. She had written only one sentence. "I'm sorry, but I cannot let you become part of this." Before anyone could understand its meaning, a scream echoed through the hotel. Detectives rushed outside. Near the alley behind the building lay another body. This time the victim was Myrtle Winchester. She had been shot through the heart. 3 murders. 1 missing suitcase. 1 frightened widow. And still no answers. Murdoch stared at the growing list of suspects. Someone was eliminating every person connected to Johnny Moon. Someone who knew exactly where everyone would be. Someone who had planned everything from the very beginning. Then Murdoch noticed something strange. Vivian Moon had disappeared. Without telling anyone. Without taking her luggage. Without leaving a trace. Had she become the killer's next victim? Or had she been hiding the truth all along? Murdoch knew one thing for certain. The biggest secret of the case had not yet been revealed. And when it finally came out, it would change everything. Murdoch had solved hundreds of cases during his career. But this one felt different. Every answer created 2 more questions. 3 people were dead. Vivian Moon had vanished. And somewhere in Toronto, $20,000 had disappeared without leaving a trace. Murdoch gathered every piece of evidence on a large table. The stolen suitcase. The antique clock. The fake identities. The blue scarf. Johnny Moon's mysterious death. At first, they looked like unrelated clues. Then Murdoch picked up the old clock Vivian had given to Inspector Choi. He carefully examined its wooden frame. Something didn't feel right. The clock was much heavier than it should have been. Using a small screwdriver, he removed the back panel. Everyone in the room fell silent. Hidden inside the clock was a thick bundle of banknotes. Exactly $20,000. The missing fortune had been hidden inside the clock all along. Suddenly everything made sense. Johnny Moon had solved the theft before his supposed death. Knowing dangerous criminals wanted the money, he secretly hid it inside the antique clock. He planned to return later and collect it safely. But before he could, everyone believed he had died in a terrible car accident. Or had he? Murdoch's eyes widened. If Johnny hid the money, he whispered, who knew where it was? Only one person. Johnny himself. Meanwhile, Inspector Choi received an urgent message asking him to come alone to an abandoned warehouse near the waterfront. The note was signed by Vivian. Ignoring Murdoch's warning, Choi rushed there hoping to find her alive. Inside the dark warehouse he finally saw Vivian. She looked terrified. Before Choi could reach her, a familiar voice echoed through the building. "You're too late." A man slowly stepped out of the shadows. Inspector Choi froze. It was Johnny Moon. Alive. The man everyone believed had died weeks earlier stood smiling in front of them. Vivian burst into tears. She admitted she had only discovered the truth the night before. Johnny had faked his own death after stealing the recovered money. He believed every criminal in Philadelphia wanted him dead. By pretending to die, he thought he could disappear forever. But things had gone terribly wrong. The gang members tracked Vivian instead. When they couldn't find the money, they followed her to Toronto. One by one they were killed. Not by Vivian, not by Choi, but by Johnny himself. He murdered Ansel Tuttle to protect his secret. He killed Jasper Stokes before the man could expose him. And when Myrtle Winchester recognized him alive, Johnny silenced her forever. Every murder had been committed to protect the hidden fortune. Johnny looked calmly at Choi. "I never wanted any of this," he said. "I just wanted a second chance." Choi shook his head. "You stopped deserving that chance the moment you chose murder." Johnny slowly raised his revolver. Before he could fire, Murdoch and the detectives burst through the warehouse doors. Police surrounded the building. Johnny grabbed Vivian and used her as a shield while backing toward the exit. Murdoch remained calm. He spoke quietly. "There is nowhere left to run." Johnny laughed bitterly. "I escaped death once." "You escaped justice," Murdoch replied. "But not forever." Johnny suddenly pushed Vivian aside and fired. The bullet missed Murdoch by inches. Detectives returned fire. Johnny stumbled backward and dropped his weapon. Realizing the escape was over, he collapsed onto the floor. For several moments, complete silence filled the warehouse. The long nightmare had finally ended. Later, Murdoch explained the entire mystery. Johnny Moon had secretly recovered the stolen money during his investigation. Instead of returning it, he kept it for himself. He staged a fatal automobile accident and disappeared. When the criminals discovered he was alive, they hunted for the hidden fortune. Their search led them to Vivian, the stolen suitcase, and finally to Toronto. The suitcase had been nothing more than a distraction. The real treasure had been hidden inside the antique clock from the very beginning. Vivian had never known the truth. She had simply become another victim of Johnny's lies. Inspector Choi returned the recovered money to its rightful owner. As for the old clock, Murdoch carefully closed its wooden case one final time. It had started as a symbol of friendship. It ended as the key to solving 3 murders. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not hidden in dark alleys or abandoned buildings. Sometimes they hide inside the smallest objects waiting for someone patient enough to discover the truth. Justice had finally been served. But Murdoch knew another mystery was always waiting somewhere beyond the next street. And when it arrived he would be ready. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this Murdoch mystery story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another thrilling mystery. Share your favorite moment in the comments below, and let us know which Murdoch Mysteries episode you'd like to see next. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember every mystery has a clue if you know where to look.